67-year-old Aruna Shanbaug has passed away. The former KEM nurse Aruna Shanbaug was in coma for the last 42 years. She was raped in November 1973 and the brutal assault left her in a vegetative state. Aruna was shifted to ICU on Tuesday after she developed difficulty in breathing and was put on ventilator after she became critical. She was later diagnosed with pneumonia. Amrita Shetke is now joining us with more details. Amrita, what has the hospital said about Aruna Shanbaug? Amrita, are you there with us? All right, let's give you the details that are coming in. A former KEM nurse who was brutally raped in 1973 and has since been in a vegetative state passed away. And these are the details we're getting about 67-year-old Aruna Shanbaug. This, in fact, was an issue that repeatedly came to light because of the brutality with which she was raped and then left. 67-year-old Aruna Shanbaug has passed away. The former KEM nurse was in coma for the last 42 years. She was raped in November 1973 and that brutal assault had left her in a vegetative state. Aruna Shanbaug was shifted to the intensive care unit on Tuesday after she had developed difficulty in breathing. She was put on ventilator after she became critical. It was later diagnosed that she was suffering from pneumonia. Aruna Shanbaug went into coma in 1973 after a brutal rape. The 67-year-old has now passed away. The former KEM nurse was in coma for past 42 years. She was raped in November 1973 and the brutal assault had left her in a vegetative state. "67-year-old Aruna Shanbaug passed away this morning. The former KEM nurse Aruna Shanbaug was in coma for the last 42 years. She was raped in November 1973 and that brutal assault had left her in a vegetative state. Aruna was shifted to the ICU a few days ago, in fact on Tuesday, after she developed difficulty in breathing and she had been put on ventilator support. It was later diagnosed that she was suffering from pneumonia. In fact, Shanbaug was rushed out of a tiny room attached to ward number 4 that had been a home for the last 4 decades on Tuesday after nurses attending to her saw that she was not able to breathe properly. She was taken to the medical ICU and started on antibiotics is what we understand. The 67-year-old nurse was in the medical ICU for the past several days. In fact, this morning it was also diagnosed that she was suffering from pneumonia and Aruna Shanbaug passed away this morning. Aruna Shanbaug had suffered a brutal sexual assault, a rape at KEM hospital 42 years ago, and she had been since lying in a vegetative state for the last 42 years. Shanbaug was battling a serious bout of pneumonia and breathing with the help of ventilator. Pinky Virani is now joining us on the phone line. She is Aruna's biographer. Pinky, what details can you share with us at the moment?
First of all, I'd like to thank every member of the media, as I do every single Indian who has prayed for her early release. We have not been able to, we have nothing to do with it, but alas, it was, she had to suffer in as much as she had. That is today, she has finally legally died because she actually died. Her brain died, as we all know, on the night of November 27, 1973, the night that she was brutally sodomized and strangulated and left for dead. So now that she has legally died, she has spared a lot of suffering. In the meanwhile, what this woman who had never received justice, my Aruna, our Aruna, this woman has left behind a completely fantastic landmark law for every Indian in her condition. It's called the passive euthanasia law. It came through the Supreme Court in 2011.
Yes.
And it was endorsed by the government of India through the Rajya Sabha last year. So whenever there is another patient who is either in a persistent vegetative state or on ventilator, both of my Aruna's conditions, whenever the doctors and the family members feel that enough is enough, and strictly speaking for any vegetative patient, 10 years is more than enough. Then, from the human rights point of view, from every other point of view, and more than anything else, seeing it through the patient's eyes, I hope that this landmark law that my Aruna, our Aruna brought for India will be applied in true spirit.
Pinky, do you have any details about any of her relatives being around? Because we understand that her elder sister also passed away and she was the closest relative she had.
No, there were other relatives also, but they were systematically turned away by the hospital a long time back. So they stopped coming. They would constantly be told, take her home, so they just stopped coming. I'm not sure if anybody would show up today, but if anybody in the hospital is listening, then I would say this, that I have spoken to her then fiancé, the doctor, whose name I've changed in the book, Dr. Sandeep Sarveswal. I've spoken to him at that time, and he had called up and he had said that, look, I'm leaving for America. I'm thinking of leaving for America with my family, because he had married and he had sons. So, but he waited for 3 years for Aruna to be taken. And I said, well, what if I'm still around? What if, what do we do? And he said, for all her bravery, because in the 60s, for a young woman to set off from some tiny little village in Karnataka and to just come alone to Bombay to become a nurse, it was a very big thing in those days, So he said, while she was a very brave person, in many ways she was very traditional. She's a Gaud Saraswat Brahmin from the Konkan area who speaks Konkani. So if you can find somebody who's a Brahmin, etc., to perform her last rite. So we have sent several letters to the hospital that my husband, Shankaraya, he's a Brahmin, so he can do the last rite. Alas, he is not in the country now. He's abroad traveling. So my request to KEM would be that if you can find someone, among the nurses, surely there is somebody who is a Gaud Saraswat Brahmin who speaks Konkani, if there is any elderly relative, who can perform the last rite, that person could please take from all of us, not just from me or my husband or my sisters or the media or India, for our Aruna.
And Pinky, it was these nurses who took care of her for so long, for 42 years, who indeed are her family. And Pinky Virani there, the biographer of Aruna Shanbaug, speaking with us this morning. Aruna Shanbaug, 67 years old, passed away this morning. Let me go across to Kamlesh Tutar. Kamlesh, are you hearing anything from the nurses who took care of Aruna Shanbaug or the hospital?
Well, it's indeed a feeling of pain, sorrow and hollowness follows the nurses who have been taking care of Aruna for the last 42 years almost, ever since the incident happened. And even after Pinky Virani, whom we just spoke to, she had filed a plea in the Supreme Court for euthanasia or mercy killing. It was turned down. The nurses had then celebrated the decision of the court, and they have treated her as part of their family. Every nurse who has served in the KEM hospital of Mumbai for last 40 years, for some time or the other, has served Aruna Shanbaug with all genuinity, all sincerity, and as one of their family members. Aruna Shanbaug was in a vegetative state. She couldn't do any of her daily routines on her own, and all that she required to do, she was kept alive. In fact, it was because of the love and affection by the nurses, the staff of KEM, that she could stretch her life till this point in time. There were several disputes about whether she would be allowed to live. She should be allowed a mercy killing because of the kind of condition that she was, the brutal sexual assault that she had undergone in 1973 when a staff ward boy had assaulted her. Ever since she has been in that state, and every nurse, Maha, who has served her life, some part of her life in the KEM hospital, has served Aruna Shanbaug. So it's a great loss for them. They are in a state of shock, though they knew that the eventual was going to happen. She was critical for last week. She was infected. She was diagnosed with pneumonia, and she was earlier also 3 years before diagnosed with pneumonia, and the nurses were still serving her, and they had not given up their hope. They felt that she is one of their family members, and they will continue to serve her. But today, this morning, as the news came in, when her heart stopped functioning. She was declared dead, and it comes as a huge loss. It's the end of a very tragic story.
Kamlesh, Pinky Virani was telling us how some of her relatives had over the last few years rather, had been turned away, and it was only her elder sister, who's now no more, who used to come visiting her. So any of the relatives have been informed about Aruna Shanbaug now?
She virtually had her old elder sister was the only one who was in touch with Aruna Shanbaug. She used to visit the KEM hospital quite frequently, but now with her demise also, there are hardly any close relatives who are there to be informed. But the hospital, in fact, as I said earlier, the hospital, the nurses, the staff there was part of her bigger family. In fact, more than her close family members, nurses who have retired, have been informed. The one who have been there with Aruna Shanbaug through all the thick and thin she has faced, they have been informed rather than the close relatives. And as we've been told that the elder sister was the only one who used to visit, there is no trace of any close relative of Aruna Shanbaug. Ever since 1973, she's been in the hospital. There were very few of them who had visited Aruna in the initial days, but after that, most of them had stopped coming to the hospital. And it was her elder sister who used to come, but she is no more. But the staff of the KM, which had become part of a larger family, they are being informed. Nurses in the hospital, the wardens, the ward boys who have been there serving them, have been in touch with others, and they are informing others about the sad demise and the loss of Aruna Shanbaug.
Kamlesh Sutar there reporting from Mumbai about the demise of Aruna Shanbaug.